I discovered Esther Carter's creepy family secret. Thanksgiving turned into a night of horror. I never should have opened that door. The moment I turned the knob, a chill crept down my spine. Felt wrong, like stepping into a waking nightmare. I should have listened to the whispers that followed me, the warnings left unspoken. Thanksgiving had always been a cheery affair at the Carter household. But that year, things turned dark. The familiar aroma of roasting turkey mixed strangely with something metallic, almost like rust. I watched as Esther's face twisted, her smile stiffening into something unnatural. Her family's laughter echoed unervingly in the dimly lit dining room, where shadows danced on the walls as if they were alive. The room was heavy with a musty smell, and beyond the flickering candles, the corners seemed to twist into dark caverns. I could feel the air growing cold, an unnatural chill that seeped into my bones. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a warning, each scrape of the chair legs sending a jolt through my body. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The laughter faded for a moment, replaced by a strange scratching sound, like nails dragging against wood. My heart raced. The shadows shifted, morphing into shapes, my imagination running wild. Or was it? I strained my ears, hoping for reassurance. But all I got was the unsettling silence, heavy and suffocating. My eyes darted around the table. Esther's family seemed off too interested in their feast, too focused on each other. Their eyes glinted eerily in the candlelight, like predatory animals assessing their prey. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing, a heavy ball of dread. As I tried to distract myself, I noticed the old painting on the wall, depicting a festive harvest. It was unsettling. The figures in it seemed alive, beckoning me with ghostly fingers. Sudden movement caught my eye. I turned, and the door I had initially closed behind me creaked open. An invitation or a warning? I hesitated, my skin prickling with a new sense of dread. The scratching noise grew louder now, reverberating through the silence. It seemed to be coming from the hallway, the dark hallway no one ever mentioned. I took a step toward it, curiosity battling against my instinct to run. That was a mistake. The moment I stepped closer, the laughter of Esther's family crescendoed, the sound warping into something horrifying and high-pitched. I felt the breath catch in my throat. "Run!" The voice screamed inside my head, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Then I saw Ida's shadowy figure at the edge of the hallway, barely visible but unmistakably there. And just as I realized what it was, the figure lurched toward me. My heart stopped. A door slammed shut somewhere in the house and everything went dark. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness devoured every trace of light, swallowing the room whole. Panic coursed through my veins as I stumbled backward, feeling the cold wall press against my back. The laughter had vanished entirely, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Each second stretched out like an eternity, a palpable tension thick enough to choke on. My heart thundered in my chest, each beat echoing in the void. Suddenly, the scratching sound returned, more frantic than before. It wasn't coming just from the hallway anymore. It was all around me, a symphony of invasive noises, clawing at the very fabric of my sanity. I strained to discern the source, but my eyes betrayed me in the oppressive darkness. Then, I heard Ida's soft, menacing whisper that prickled the hair on my neck. "Join us, join us." The whisper morphed into a chorus of voices, overlapping and weaving into a dreadful tapestry of despair. It was as if every soul that had ever inhabited this house had converged to beckon me. A shiver ran through my body. I recoiled not from just fear but an instinctual drive to escape. I had to find a way out. I turned to retrace my steps to the dining room, but when I reached out to touch the wall, it felt different. Instead of the familiar texture of plaster, my fingers grazed over something wet and slick, something that sent my mind spiraling into a haze of nausea. I whipped my hand back to find it glistening unnaturally in the dark red, dark like the memories I dared not expose. "Help me," the voice quivered in my ear, the sound childlike yet sinister that I barely caught it an echo from the hallway. The scratch of a bare foot against the floor mixed with the whispers now, a rhythmic scratching down the hallway, filled with erratic urgency. My instincts screamed for me to flee, but the gnawing curiosity in my gut pulled me forward once more. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice cracking, mingling with the notes of fear thrumming in my throat. There was a pause, then a soft giggle that fell into silence, blurring the lines of sanity and dread within the confines of the house. As I edged closer to the hallway, my heart sank at the realization it wasn't just the shadows at play. Something else coiled within the darkness. The air thickened, pressing against my chest as if the very house itself were constricting me, forcing me to confront the horror lurking beyond. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to retreat, but I pressed on, curiosity and fear entwining in a macabre dance. The whisper returned, more insistent, more insidious. "Will you play?" Although my mind conjured images of escape, it was as if an unseen force gripped my feet, pulling me closer to the end of the hallway. The shadows began to shift more violently now, roiling against the walls as the cold intensified. I could sense something immense lurking just beyond the threshold of visibility, waiting with unfathomable patience. And then, directly ahead, a dim glow flickered into existence, casting long, twisted shadows that flickered like flames. My breath hitched. That light was wrong, too bright, too inviting amidst the dread that filled the air. It beckoned me closer, and with agonizing deliberation, I took a step forward before I could register what happened. The voices crescendoed into a cacophony, a maelstrom of laughter and sorrow that drowned out all my senses. I turned back, panic absorbing me whole when the weight of the darkness closed in tighter than it ever had. The glow was now an unsettling flame, revealing ghastly shadows of those I recognized, the faces of Esther's family contorted into grotesque smiles, their eyes boring into mine, "Welcome home." The chorus sang that I stumbled, retreating, unable to discern how far I'd gotten. The door had vanished. The hallway stretched infinitely before me. There was no escape as the laughter reached a deafening pitch. A cold hand suddenly grasped my wrist from the shadows, pulling me into the abyss. The last thing I saw was Esther's face, no longer the cheery facade I once adored, but a mask of flat horror that bore witness to something far more sinister. Then, everything went dark once more, and in that oppressive silence, I understood the belonging I craved was not to family, but to something far worse. I woke to a damp, musty scent enveloping me like a damp shroud. The air was rancid, as if decades of rot and despair had mingled with the dust of forgotten memories. I blinked, the remnants of dark oblivion receding just enough for me to make sense of my surroundings. I huddled on a cold, stone floor utterly devoid of warmth, the faint luminescence providing ghostly outlines of what might have once been a cellar. The confined space felt heavy, as if the walls were closing in to smother any flicker of hope. What had happened? The last spark of consciousness was riddled with echoes of Esther's family, the ecstatic laughter twisting into a nightmarish chant. I swallowed hard, forcing my body to move. I had to find a way out, an exit to freedom. Rusted chains rattled nearby as I attempted to stand, and I jumped at the sound, scanning the shadows once more. Panic surged as the distant, familiar laughter returned, echoing through the darkened chamber, prompting every instinct within me to flee. Join us," the words flowed into the darkness like poison, dripping from unseen lips. I turned, heart racing, desperately tracing the outlines of the dank space before me. Glimpses of what surrounded me emerged. Remnants of furniture were strewn carelessly about, their forms twisted and broken. Shadows seemed to twist and rhythmy breath quickened as the reality of my surroundings sunk in. I spotted a staircase against one wall, leading upward, the only beacon of potential salvation. I crept forward, each step feeling like a violation against the currents of the darkness. My fingers grazed the cold, damp stone as I ascended, heart pounding with the fear of what awaited me above. But just as I reached the top, a breath caught in my throat. The door that had once offered an exit stood ajar, an unsettling invitation leading me back into the belly of the house. Its cracked edges revealed flickers of light spilling from within a sickly yellow glow that unfurled like a moth drawn to a flame, promising warmth yet whispering danger. Pushing the door open, I stepped into the narrow corridor, its decor a twisted homage to ghastly elegance. Family portraits hung at odd angles, faces leering down at me with eyes that flickered with a malevolent glint in the pulsating light. I felt their judgment as I treaded deeper, the sensation wrapping around my throat like a vice. "Can you see them?" A voice hissed from nowhere, yet everywhere. "They're waiting for you." I pressed onward, the air thickening until it felt as if I was swimming through a murky pond of dread. The laughter crescendoed again, filling the hallway with an unnatural resonance. Somewhere behind me, I could hear soft footfalls. My mind conjured images of Esther's family, their silhouettes merging with the shadows, hungry eyes watching my every move. My breath quickened as I came upon a warped mirror at the end of the corridor, its surface marred, reflecting not my image but blurred shades of those who had graced this house before me. I leaned closer, compelled to examine the distorted visages trying to break free from their confinement. Their mouths moved, forming words that I couldn't hear, yet felt echoing within my mind. "Join us." Suddenly, I staggered back, struck by a horrifying realization. Their mouths were not merely forming the words. They were crying out for help. Terror gripped my heart as the surrounding shadows shifted and warped further, vultures encircling a dying prey. In that moment, the temperature plunged. The air became sharp with an otherworldly chill, and a piercing scream erupted from the depths of the mirror as a hand burst forth, clawing at the glass and breaking the surface with a sickening crack. It was a hand small and frail, glistening with blood, igniting a flood of fear unmistakably familiar. My mind raced. Was it possible? "Help me!" the tiny voice shrieked, the pitch wrapping tightly around my sanity. And just like that, other hands joined, their fingers grasping, desperate and cold. A congregation of tortured souls desperately trying to break free. I felt the pull of something ancient, something buried within the very walls of the house. The weight of their collective despair was overwhelming, and I could not shake the sensation of one voice rising above the chaos, one that I recognized all too well. "Esther." Suddenly, the doors of the room slammed shut, plunging me back into darkness as an all-consuming force swept through, dragging me toward the cursed mirror where the faces writhed in agony. All at once, time ceased. I stood, frozen, as the reflection shimmered, revealing a world behind the glass, a world oozing malevolence, beckoning. Then, in a flash, Esther appeared, her face twisted in anguish yet desperately pleading. "Save us," she screamed. And before I could react, the glass shattered, shards flying towards me like daggers, glinting with malicious intent. The cry of the lost souls shattered the silence, sealing my fate as I was engulfed in a vortex of shrieks and frozen memories, pulled inexorably toward the other side. As the darkness closed around me, I realized I was not the one who would be saved. There was no escape, only the deeper horrors hid waiting to claim me. As I fell into the churning depths of the shattered mirror, the sensation of being pulled apart by unseen claws overwhelmed me. The jagged shards didn't tear my flesh, but instead sent waves of icy dread spiraling through my mind. Each fragment was a memorial whisper of someone who once lived, someone who fell victim to the darkness thriving within this house. I gripped my head, fighting against the cacophony, but the voices bore down upon me, relentless. "Join us! Join us!" they echoed, a relentless chant that spiraled into the recesses of my soul. I plunged through an endless void, my body ebbing between reality and the otherworld, visions of Esther's family flickering before Meher, mother smiling sweetly one moment, morphing into a twisted creature of fury and despair the next. Their laughter turned to wails, each cry slicing through the fabric of my thoughts. Leaving me breathless, I landed with a bone-rattling thud on a floor that felt both alien and suffocating, surrounded by decaying remnants of a past long buried. The air was thick with an overpowering sense of dread, like a weight upon my chest that made it difficult to breathe. As I struggled to orient myself, wisps of darkness coiled around the corners of my vision, hovering and waiting. "Esther?" I called out, desperation lacing my voice. "Where are you?" The silence that answered was worse than the tortured whispers. I pushed to my feet, scanning the horror surrounding me. This was no cellar or basement. I found myself in a room-an ill-lit dining hall dressed for an eternal Thanksgiving. An enormous table stretched across the space, laden with grotesque dishes that seemed to shift and writhe with every passing second. A rotting turkey, its flesh black and oozing, sat in the center, and cobwebs draped the once glorious chandelier like skeletal hands reaching down. Yet it wasn't just the decaying food that made my stomach churn. It was the place settings. Each chair was occupied by a spectral figure, Esther's family, their grotesque appearances a haunting testament to the gluttony that had claimed them. Their eyes glowed with a sickly hue, faces frozen in expressions of manic delight intertwined with despair. My heart raced. I glanced to the far end of the table, where Esther sat with an empty gaze, her skin stretched tight over her bones. She looked almost alive, her mouth barely moving yet forming silent pleas. "Help us," she whispered, but the words were lost amid the mocking laughter, her family's laughter. Suddenly, one of the specter's father figure, grotesquely oversized with a maw that opened too wide, turned its gaze toward me. "You've joined the feast," he bellowed, his voice a mixture of mirth and menace. "We feast on souls here." Panic clutched my throat as I stumbled backward, my foot catching on a tattered tablecloth that slithered around my ankle like a serpent. The chairs creaked and shifted, the ghostly family members rising as one, their hands reaching toward me, hungry for my essence. "Join us! Join us!" I fought against the sheet, tearing free as the figures lunged, their cold fingers brushing against my skin and sending ice through my veins. I dashed through the doorway on the far side of the hall, my instincts screaming at me to escape. I chased shadows through another corridor, the anguished cries and twisted mirth chasing me like hounds. Flickering lights followed my every move, illuminating memories splashed against the peeling wallpaper visions of Esther's childhood. Her happy laughter now twisted as if mocking my escape, but the corridor abruptly ended. I skidded to a halt before a swirling vortex of darkness, a gaping maw that pulsated with a life of its own. My heart raced, instincts urging me to retreat. "Remember," said Esther's voice, weaving itself into the fabric of my panic, "you must remember it all." Suddenly, an icy breeze swept through, and the memories flooded back, a torrent I struggled to suppress. The family gathering, the laughter, the preparations Esther's mother had cried that night, saying the family would always be together. The hints of ritual masked as celebration, whispers of an ancient tradition hidden behind a deceptive smile. In that instant, the shadows coalesced, pulling together behind meth familiar faces of Esther's family emerging in the vortex, their hunger palpable. Their mouths moved in sync, chanting, "Join us! Join us!" I drew a breath, but the vortex yawned wider, threatening to pull me into its depths. I stepped back, heart pounding, and finally realized that despair lurked not just in the house but within me. I was a key to their darkness and to the secret of the Thanksgiving feast that had claimed them all. But as their pleas crescendoed into a deafening roar, a flicker of humanity within a family long lost crashed through the fog. I had to confront the truth, to sever the ties that bound my fate with theirs, before the darkness consumed us both. With one last surge of courage, I stepped forward. The ground trembled beneath me, and I was met with a staggering realization: this was not just their family secret. It was mine too, and before I could act, the door behind me slammed shut with a boom that shook the room, sealing my fate as I fell into the swirling darkness of their desires. The haunting laughter of Esther's family closing in around me, and that moment, the scream that bubbled up from my chest met the deafening laughter of the accursed feast, and I knew there was no turning back. The darkness greedily enveloped me, a suffocating shroud that made each gasp for air feel like a betrayal. My heart raced as I felt the frigid fingers of the spectral family grasping my arms, each touch like ice seeping into my very core. The air rattled with the echoes of their insatiable hunger, a primal sound that clawed at my sanity, urging me to surrender. "Stay with us," they cried, their voices a cacophonous blend that mirrored the chaos of my own thoughts. "Share in the feast." The world around me shifted violently, the images of the dining hall fracturing and rearranging as if the house itself was alive, twisting to unleash its malevolence. In an instant, I was torn from the hall of haunted laughter and thrust into another memory, one less savory, a raw wound that splintered my already fraying nerves. That I stood in a cramped kitchen, the air heavy with the scent of burnt meat and something much worse. A dim light flickered overhead, casting shadows that danced like spirits across the cracked walls. Young Esther stood beside her mother, a woman pale and drawn, her eyes suffused with a shadow that seemed to whisper secrets. They were preparing for a feast, the kind that brought families together, or so one would think. Esther watched, wide-eyed, as her mother stirred a bubbling pot. "We must always be ready, my darling," she said in a tone both soothing and unnerving. "Thanksgiving is about family, and family means loyal tie to each other and to the traditions that bind us." The words hung in the air like a warning, a promise tainted by the undercurrents of something sinister. My heart raced as I caught glimpses of fresh meat hanging from hooks, the glint of blades sharper than the truth. Their laughter flared up like the flames in the hearth, but all I felt was dread clawing at my Guten intuition, whispering of the darkness festering just below the surface. Before I could wrestle with the weight of this gruesome reality, the kitchen warped again, collapsing into another dimension, a cellar dripping with thick, black ichor. Shelves lined with jars containing missing pieces of lives, their contents swirling, begging for recognition. I recoiled as I recognized the shadows within figures pried from the fabric of their existence, yearning to escape the imprisonment and torment of the feast that had forever altered their fates. A voice resonated from the shadows, a sickly sweet tone that coiled around me like smoke. "You are one of us now," it hissed. "One of us bound to the darkness." That I stumbled back, unable to breathe. The family's pleas echoed in my ears, contorted shapes scrabbling closer, their faces merging into ghoulish masks of grief and glee. It was all wrong, all terrifyingly twisted. Esther's mother loomed in the back of my mind, a specter grinning with delight, her knife glistening ominously in the half-light. "Every Thanksgiving requires sacrifice," she whispered from a shadowy corner, the words gnashing like teeth. "They fed on love, my love. And tonight, they grow stronger." As I stood frozen in disbelief, carved faces of Esther's family slithered into view, hands extend forward imploringly, fingers twitching toward me with a desperate hunger that left no room for doubt. I caught the eye of Esther, her sunken gaze piercing through the swirling chaos. "Remember, remember," she pleaded, her voice rising desperately above the growing din. Just as recognition began to claw its way into my mind, the basement around me ruptured, and I was thrust back through the gaping maw into the dining hall. Every spectral figure shook with laughter, but it was a laughter tinged with malice, charged with an urgency I could not comprehend. They surged forward, and I scrambled towards the edges of the grotesque table, but the room twisted and shifted. There was no escape. Hands grasped at my clothes, my skin, grasping for an essence they craved. A chaotic rhythm settled in my veins. Panic morphed into a primal urge to survive. "Join us! Join us!" they sang, the voices layering to create a haunting symphony of despair. With each breath, the shadows drew nearer, swirling around me like a tempest. The world spun, memories colliding and morphing into a nightmarish funeral dirge, each note reflecting a piece of Esther's family's dark legacy. And with every tremor, new horrors began to manifest, a flicker of the past, a shadow of what would come if I couldn't find a tether to reality. Using the last vestiges of my strength, I lunged backward, my fingers brushing against the cold wall behind me. The shadows recoiled. The sound of shattering glass echoed as if the house itself screamed in protest. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a reflection rippling in the darkening air, a mirror of my own desperation interwoven with countless others who had been lost. Then I saw Hera's face buried beneath the layers of the home, and in that instant, the truth unfurled like a dreadful flag. "How long until the next feast?" Her voice dripped with malice, her eyes sparkling against the fading light. The echo of sickly glee sent shivers crawling down my spine, leaving the undeniable weight of her intention echoing in my mind. And just as the nefarious chant reached a fever pitch, a thunderous crack reverberated through the dining hall as the very walls began to tremble, threatening to collapse as events long foretold echoed closer. I gasped, fear clawing up my spine. What lay beyond the dark threshold of this cursed night? Would I be the next sacrifice in a nightmarish rite, too entangled to escape? And then reality warped, the figures began to congeal, merging into one, and the familiar voice rose above the din, clear and cold. It's time for you to join the family. In that moment, the veil broke, and as the sound of 1,000 lamenting souls erupted into a cacophony of despair, I felt myself being pulled apart, caught between the dimensions of sacrifice and resurrection, the feast not about to end. The screaming began, a chorus of the damned reaching out from the very walls of the house that twisted with a life of its own. The grotesque figures churned around me, their voices weaving through the air, each syllable laced with a hunger I could almost taste. "Join us! Join us!" they shrieked, the pleas morphing into a sinister invitation that sent icy fingers creeping up my spine. The shadows pulsated, the phantoms anchoring in the recesses of my mind, and just as my recollections of Esther's family threatened to coalesce into something unbearably real, a pulse throbbed through the ground beneath my feet. The oppressive weight of entrapment began to pull at my very essence, as if the specters sought not my flesh but my spirit to complete a tapestry woven from despair and sacrifice. Drawing on every ounce of willpower, I clutched my head, trying to purge the insistent whispers clamoring for my surrender. Screamed confessions filled my ears. These were not mere family traditions they spoke of. They were dark commitments to the hunger of the house, a pact written in blood and tied to the essence of all those who had come before me. The foggy memories danced at the periphery of my vision. Another family gathered around a different table. Laughter turned hysterical as their eyes glazed over in a feverish trance, each one but a cog in the horrid machine of preservation. I blinked rapidly, trying to distance myself from the baneful company, from the sensation of their hollow mirth clawing at my rationality. "Esther," I screamed, desperate. "What happened? You must remember. We have to fight." The faces flickered in shock, and for a fleeting moment, their ravenous expressions faltered. A shimmer of clarity sparked within Esther's vacant eyes, as if a dim light switched on in the endless dark. "They call to you," she whispered. It was barely audible over the clamor of the damned. "Remember why we cannot celebrate." A tidal wave of memory crashed over us, snatching moments from the past. The sight of a broken table, remnants of celebration turned to anguish, the floor soaked in an innocent's tears, the whisper of betrayal that hung thick like smoke. Each fragment united as though bound by an unseen tether. What was the true meaning of Thanksgiving to this accursed family? It was becoming all too clear, unspooling like a devastating film in my head. Suddenly, the fabric of reality began to rip again, violent waves of energy coursing through the air, unsettling the debris that littered the flow. Or a clash of forces I could sense creeping around me, threatening to split the dimensions wide open. Specters whipped around me, the air thick and stifling with their unholy desires, as I struggled to maintain my grip on this transient existence. As the shadows deployed the brunt of their hunger, the grotesque faces melted into one another, and the atmosphere thickened, stifling my breath. The walls of the dining hall shrieked, and in a moment of desperate clarity, I shouted, "I refuse to be a part of this feast." The house shuddered, a violent pulse disrupting the air. I felt something ancient and furious responding to my words, reverberating through the foundation as though the very spirit of the home recoiled. A sense of unprecedented power charged through me, igniting an instinctive resolve. "Fight it, Esther. Your mother's darkness cannot have you," I called, fury surging through the tangled connections of our minds, driving back against the tide of despair that threatened to swallow us whole. For an instant, the shadows hesitated, doubt mingling with their spectral joy, uncertainty weaving through the fabric of their hunger. But before I could grasp the thread of victory, the wayward darkness intensified, and the room twisted violently as screams of agony erupted from the walls, voices of the lost blending with the echoes of the living. I saw glimpses of faces trapped in a nightmarish waltz of starvation, their pleas evolving into a dreadful symphony of shared pain. Suddenly, I felt with profound terror the flood of memories shift again the table in the dining hall contorted, merging old family faces with the present. Esther's mother appeared at the head once more, knife glinting ominously, her lips curling into a malicious smile. "You cannot fight your blood," she hissed, a living embodiment of their horrific legacies. "It is too late for that." Just as she lunged forward with the glimmering blade, I caught a flash of movement behind Hera's figure, cultivated from shadows, emerged with unfamiliar desperation. "Esther, we can end this." The voice rang out, breaking through the cacophony, a light in the dawning horror. But before I could ascertain who that voice belonged to, there was a deafening crack, as if the very house was poised to devour its denizens whole. The walls splintered, and I was yanked backward into a vortex of screaming souls while the air turned to vapor. The last thing I saw was Esther's expression shifting from despair to resolve, and in an instant, it struck me here was no longer a clear division between predator and prey. I was teetering on the precipice of something much darker, where the line was blurred. Just as the reality of the house crumbled around me, the last remnants of sanity flickered, and I felt myself slip into the depths of the void, the voices of the family crescendoing to a piercing haunting plea that echoed through time. Then, silence descended as I felt my essence unfurl in the dark. Was I lost to them entirely? Was I to join them in their unending feast, woven into the tapestry of horror that defined Esther's family? A final laugh ripped through the darkness, a distant echo of a child's joy forsaken, and with that echo, a bone-chilling whisper haunted me. "You are invited." And in that moment I understood. I understood why the next feast was upon us. The void shuddered around me, a weightless expanse where time was lost and purpose dissolved. A feverish heartbeat pulsed in the ether, a rhythm that entwined with the memories that surged within me, clawing at the edges of my consciousness. The distance between the living and the dead closed in like a noose tightening around my throat. Above me, I could perceive shimmering forms, outlines like broken mirrors reflecting despair, and within that chaotic sea of shadows, Esther's anguished visage flickered like a candle battling the wind. I gasped as fragments of sensation flooded back. The cold floor beneath my body, the putrid scent of decay mingling with something sweet, the hallowed halls of the house stretching before me as if mocking my efforts. Unsure of where I stood, I grasped at the darkness, feeling the remnants of familiar horror nagging at the edges of my psyche. With a laborious effort, I climbed to my feet and stumbled away from the remnants of the fantastic void. My heart raced as reality began to coalesce around me. I was in the dining room again, yet it felt wrong, grotesquely reclaimed by the very entities that had tried to snatch me into their folds. The air crackled with malevolence, a tangible presence pressing against my skin, as the figures of Esther's family began to shift, their grotesque forms evolving into something worse than I had known. At the head of the table, Esther's mother smiled with a smile both demonic and triumphant, her bloodied knife dripping what looked like remnants of the unspeakable meal prepared just moments before. "You thought you could escape?" she crooned, her voice a croaking melody that echoed off the walls. "The feast is not complete without you, dear guest." That I whipped around, desperation clawing at my throat. "Esther, we need to get out of here." But when I turned to reach for her, I found that she was no longer beside me. A new wave of panic rushed through my body, the shadows beyond the table elongating like ghosts set upon by the flames of tenacity. "Fear not, your place is right here," a voice gurgled from the far corner, a figure obscured by the shifting shadows. It was a child, their gaze impossibly innocent amidst the torment. My blood ran cold as I recognized the face, a stricken reflection of Esther as a young girl. Yet, there was something distinctly horrific in the way the child's eyes seemed void of life, glistening with an otherworldly knowing. "You're one of us now." That I staggered backward, the dining table warping into an otherworldly visage. The euphoric joy of Thanksgiving was ensnared within the horror of it all, manifestations of writhing souls dancing like marionettes under a macabre puppeteer. I felt the whispers seeping into my mind, swarming around me like locusts. Each one clawed at myself, attempting to drag me down into the pit where laughter was steeped in anguish. I, in my fear-stricken state, I remembered the flicker of resistance, the power of our shared connection to drive away the hunger. Esther, I shouted, clenching my fists against the surging tide of shadows. You have to fight. A ripple coursed through the specters circling us, and for a brief, heart-stopping moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement. Esther straining against the confines of the otherworldly grip, her form wavering like a candle in the howling wind, struggling to hang on. But then the shadows surged, slithering through the room like serpents, and she was swallowed whole, her voice a distant echo fading into a suffocating silence. I cried, and the echoes of my turmoil ignited another surge, pushing my feet forward despite the gnawing dread within. I could feel an unseen eye boring into my back, the reflections of my fears coiling like tendrils of darkness around my limbs. With every inch I moved, the silhouettes intertwined with my very essence, threatening to tear me apart piece by piece. The child followed me, spinning through the air as if gravity were a mere suggestion, and with a disturbing innocence, asked, "Why do you wish to leave? You belong here." Her laughter twinkled with unearthly delight. We could feast together, like family. "No," I screamed, but my defiance was swallowed by the swell. With a burst of terror-fueled strength, I lunged toward the corner of the room, my heart racing as I realized the shadowed figures clung to the walls with eager anticipation. Their hands reaching out, waiting to claim me. I stumbled against the jagged roots of despair, and in that moment, clarity struck. The child was nothing more than a vessel, a conduit for the sickening legacy of Esther's familia macabre link to the insatiable appetite housed within the bones of this place. But it didn't matter. I couldn't succumb. I had to reach Esther. I had to free her from this cycle of horror that remained bound by blood. I whirled to the center of the room, forcing the chaos surrounding me to settle into silence. "Enough!" I bellowed, summoning the last reservoir of strength within me. "You will not feast on the innocent anymore." As the words escaped my lips, the house trembled violently, a rumble rising from the depths as if acknowledging my defiance. The walls began to shudder and crack, the grotesque faces intertwined in agony momentarily dissipating. But then, like a tidal wave gathering from all corners of darkness, the shadows lunged with renewed fury, the anguished screams blasting through the room as I felt a grip tighten around my throat. Just as all light seemed lost, the child's laughter ricocheted within the cryptic depths, a haunting melody that echoed with an ancestral promise, and a single word rolled from her lips, chilling my very core. "Dinner?" And in that instant, I felt myself drawn back into the whirlpool of despair as the room shattered with otherworldly laughter, the veil between life and death threatening to consume me whole. As I tumbled toward the looming shadows, I grasped at the air in vain, my heart racing with a chilling realization that the feast was not just about blood, it was about the very essence of existence. The last thing I saw was a glimmer of light behind the shadows. Esther, her face twisted in a profound sorrow, the knife from her mother's hand shimmering like a beacon. "Please, don't leave me," she cried amidst the chaos, desperation weaving her words into a lifeline. But before I could answer, darkness enveloped me, and the house roared in crashing waves of fury, leaving me breathless as the cycle spiraled into maddening chaos. I was teetering on the edge, and suddenly, the realization broke upon me. What awaited me was worse than the fate I'd fled. What lay beyond that darkness was a realm where Thanksgiving was transformed, holidays bound by eternal suffering, and the looming shadow of Esther's family waited to reclaim their next unwitting participant. And that heartbeat of nihilism, the void opened wide, and I glimpsed the all-consuming truth. I was not merely a guest in this house. I had become the meal. Would I resist that final bite? The answer hung fleetingly in mid-air, laden with dread, as the shadows closed in around me with insatiable hunger. My pulse quickened against the rising tide of darkness, the weight of despair wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. I was not just lost. I was a moth to a flame, drawn ever closer to the monstrous jaws of Esther's family's grotesque celebration. With a sudden surge of will, I turned my gaze toward where Esther had stood. Even in the chaos, I could sense her presence lingering, a glimmer of hope within the oppressive gloom. "Esther," I gasped, forcing the name out through the constriction around my throat. It felt like an incantation, a lifeline stretched across an abyss. "We can fight this," You're stronger than, but the words died on my lips as flares of shadow rippled through the room, and the child's laughter twisted into haunting shrieks that echoed against the wooden beams. Fight? Oh sweet, naive adult. Do you not see? She is a part of it. We are family now. The tiny figure twirled in the murky air, her malice disguised as innocent delight. You have always been deep in the marrow. The thought gnawed at me like a ravenous beast. Was this horrific fate inevitable for all who entered this house? Shadows crawled over the walls like alive, pulsating beings, whispering secrets that dragged at the edges of my memorious cycle of suffering, rebirth, and insatiable hunger. Eyes wide with horror, I began to back away, fighting against whatever enchantment tethered me to this malevolent space. My breath quickened as more figures emerged from the twisted confines of the room, their remorseless gazes locking onto me with dark hunger. Esther's relatives, grotesque parodies of what they once were, watched with morbid glee. Their hands, stained with the remnants of unspeakable acts, reached longingly toward me. You don't understand, the woman at the head of the table croaked. This is more than a meal. This is a legacy. Join us. Help her realize the feast. Our feast. No, I spat, embodying every shred of defiance left in me. This isn't her legacy, it's a curse. With a fierce sprint backward, I felt an inexplicable force pulling me further into their clutches, the very air thickening with malice. But then, as if sensing my struggle, I heard a familiar voice cut through the chaos. Jacob, you must listen. It was Esther, but the sound was distorted, struggling to break through the layers of despair enveloping her. You have to find the heart of the house. It's the only way. The flicker of her essence ignited a spark of clarity in my mind. The heart of the house? My instincts screamed that there was something transformative hidden within these walls, a secret that could reveal the truth and obliterate the cycle. The blood feasting, the twisted roles we played, all of it must be anchored to where this dread had all begun. Where? I shouted, the desperation clawing at my voice. Where do I find it? But before she could respond, a thunderous force shook the very foundation of the house. The shadows coalesced into a massive, writhing beast, a grotesque amalgamation of shapes and faces that screamed with the agony of souls bound to this place. Its form was vast, a maw opening with gaping darkness like a void intent upon swallowing all light. That in that moment of terror, fear surged within me, electrifying my nerves as I felt the weight of family heritage bear down on my shoulders. A relentless urge to flee gripped me, but Esther's fading silhouette ignited my resolve once more. She was trapped, ensnared by the very substance of this malevolence. But still, she fought against it, her voice echoing in my mind like a drumbeat of hope. Jacob, her voice cracked through the clamor. The way is in the cellar. The heart desires blood but thrives on sacrifice. Somewhere deep down, the connection surged, igniting adrenaline as I twisted and plunged through the throng of grasping shadows. Their screams rose in pitch, transforming into cacophonous howls of fury. Desperation lent my legs speed, as my heart resonated against the pull of the cellar door. With stumbling steps, I bounded forward, the door creaking to life with a rush of cold air flooding outward. The cellars were far darker than the surfaces above, dank and foul with the stink of despair. I hesitated only for a heartbeat before fear drove me onwards, burying deeper into the darkness, aided only by flickering memories of Esther, promising light amid obliteration. But as I descended into the depths, I felt a sudden shift in the air, as if something unspeakable had awakened. A damp chill seeped through the walls, caressing my skin with icy fingers. Shadows lurked within, whispering once more, "You should have joined first. Leave now, and she shall suffer the consequences." The weight of dread pinned me against the wall, and for the briefest moment, I faltered. Then, I sensed a flicker at the base of the staircase, a glimmer of ethereal light cascading from a door ajar. The heart, the source of malice. Just as I lunged toward the door, I heard Esther's anguished screech echo from up above, piercing through the woven darkness. "Jacob, they're coming for you!" A bone-chilling roar resonated through the corridor, pulling me toward the light and the dreadful crescendo of shadows. Would I succumb to the legacy, or could I sever its chains forever? The darkness surged again with my choice, the promise of fate stretching endlessly before me like a banquet, waiting to be laid bare. The door flew open, and I stepped into the light only to be met with a sight so horrific it twisted my very soul. The heart of the house rose before me, a pulsating mass of blood and sinew, and I was already too late. The heart of the house beckoned, pulsating with an otherworldly rhythm that felt almost alive. Blood-red tendrils snaked across the ground, intertwining with the decayed floorboards, each pulse a sickening echo of my own heart. Gripped by revulsion and fascination, I staggered toward it, unable to look away from the grotesque display of flesh and sinew. The room was a macabre shrine, decorated with the remnants of past sacrifices. Tarnished silverware, rotting remnants of faded photographs of smiling faces now twisted into masks of horror, and candles that had long since died, leaving only dark pools of wax as their grim remains. It felt like standing in the open maw of a colossal beast, every fiber of my being screaming to flee, yet an insatiable curiosity bound my feet to the ground as I stood paralyzed in the doorway. The air thickened with dread, bringing with it the faint sound of laughter and echo of innocent glee twisted into something monstrous. Then, more chilling than all that had come before, I felt eyes upon medicines of them. From every shadow, figures emerged, their gnarled limbs stretching toward the pulsating heart, their faces locked in grotesque grins that betrayed no humanity. Esther's family had returned, their forms more ghastly than ever, a congregation summoned by the very essence of this abomination. "Welcome, Jacob," the matriarch croaked, stepping forward from the throng. Her eyes gleamed with an unholy light, reflecting only madness. "You've come to join us, I see, to feed the heart that binds us all. I won't be a part of this," I shouted, the otherworldly horror clawing at my spine. I surged towards the pulsating mass, drawn not by will but by a desperate need to escape the insidious bond tightening around my throat. But the shadows writhed eagerly, coalescing into tendrils that lashed out, wrapping around my wrists and ankles like living chains. Panic ignited anew, and I struggled against the sinister embrace. "Let her go!" I screamed, desperate for Esther to break free from the malignant grip of her cursed lineage. Suddenly, the heart throbbed in a sickening rhythm, as if responding to my cries. My vision blurred as emotions twisted within mirage, desperation, sorrow all weaving into a tapestry of madness. Just over the sound of my own heartbeat, I thought I heard Esther's voice, soft but unmistakable amid the revelry. "Jacob, please listen. You must sever the bond, or it will end us both." Driven by that flicker of hope, I pulled against the shadows, frantically searching for an escape, for a weapon in this nightmare of flesh. Then, in the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a dagger gleaming amongst the chaos, its blade darkened with age and ritualistic marks a remnant of their sacrifices. Wrenching my arm, I broke free of one of the shadowy graspers long enough to lunge for the dagger. As I grasped its hilt, an unholy scream erupted from the heart, echoing through every corner of despair, as if it recognized the threat. It drew upon all of its anger, and the air thickened with whispered warnings. "Our family will not be torn apart so easily." As I stood there, trembling in the cold grip of dread, the ground began to rumble beneath me, the entities around me shifting and quaking as if the very house resented my act of defiance. "Jacob!" Esther's voice split the cacophony, laden with urgency and despair. "You must strike the heart. It is our only chance." The shadows roared, surging toward me, joining hands in a living wall of horror designed to suffocate hope. With the dagger aloft, I prepared to plunge it into the vile mass of crimson flesh. But just as the blade kissed the first layer of pulsing sinew, an agonizing force lashed up my arm, seizing it with a grip so strong I was momentarily paralyzed. The screams of my ancestors, twisted with anguish and despair, filled the air. Unseen mouths whispered dark secrets even as the heart surged violently beneath the dagger, as if rallying against the impending act of defiance. "Join us, Jacob," they beckoned, voices merging into a monstrous chorus, a memory of family ties. Born from darkness, threatening to worm their way into my mind. Become one with the legacy, and know true power. A severe cold swept through the chamber, numbing the very essence of my heart as I found myself suspended between salvation and damnation. I fought against the encroaching tide of memories, battling the seductive call of the shadows, their twisted sense of legacy promising closeness and power over the indecipherable dread of my own fate. Jacob, choose. Esther's voice broke through, fierce and alive, like a flare lighting my way. Just then, a harsh light erupted from the heart, a blinding force seeking to engulf me entirely. In that moment, the room distorted, collapsing around me into a maelstrom of laughter, screams, and my own name. Jacob! Echoed louder and louder until it drowned all reason, leaving nothing but impending darkness. Before I could respond, the dagger slipped from my grip, tumbling to the floor, and the world around me began to slip away, vanishing into cold nothingness that threatened to devour my very soul. And then everything went black. I floated in the abyss, encircled by shrill echoes that clawed at my sanity, a throbbing cacophony of despair laced with memories tugging me back toward the darkness. For an infinite moment, I was adrift, suspended in a formless void until I felt a tremor of warmth, the tether to the realm of the living. The shadows whispered of my fate, and I knew they were waiting. An instant later, the oppressive weight of memory consumed me, unveiling scenes that twisted my gut into knots of terror. An eternity spent within the walls of the Carter house, encased in the legacy that had claimed my soul. Then, with an urgency that rippled through the fabric of time, I shot forward, breaking through the shroud of blackness until I gasped for breath. Blinking in disorientation, I found myself back in the dining hall, but it wasn't as I remembered. The table remained, grotesquely adorned with a feast that felt both familiar and foreign. Yet now, a blinding light shattered the darkness that had cloaked the space. The once haunting figures of Esther's family warped in their semi-translucent forms, swirling like tormented smoke around me, each face echoing hatred and pain. The air pulsed with anticipation, feeding off the despair that lingered just beneath the surface. "Look who's returned," croaked Esther's mother, towering as a vengeful specter at the head of the table, her glee reminding me of a twisted fairy tale gone awry. "You thought you could escape the heart of it all? You were drawn here for a reason." Panic surged in me as I spotted Esther's shadowy form, her outline flickering, weakened and distorted through the haze. "Jacob, the heart is near," she cried, desperately reaching, but I felt paralyzed beneath the weight of their insatiable hunger. "Join us," the family echoed, their voices a sinister harmony, the dining table now buckling beneath the weight of their cadaverous desires. It was clear now that they weren't just a family bound by love and tradition. They were creatures of a darker covenant, souls devoured and reinvigorated through endless cycles of sacrifice. The heart of the house beat in synchrony with my frenzied pulse, a vile reminder that I was intertwined with this legacy more than I ever wanted to admit. But the warmth of recollection ignited within me, could feel the dagger whispering from wherever it had landed, but more importantly, I could sense the different expressions of family that betrayed traditional values, projecting deceit masquerading as affection. I knew what I had to do, and the very thought sent shudders through my core. "This ends now," I roared, feeling the swell of forgotten strength and enmity rip through me, drawing on the memories of every family gathering that had been twisted into malevolence. The times I had sought a place to belong but had only encountered walls of darkness and despair. I closed my eyes, trusting my instincts to guide me through the chaos. The spectral figures recoiled, their expressions shifting in confusion. I lunged toward the heart, my hand desperate to grasp the dagger that awaited. The sensation of the hilt ignited a surge of clarity, a primal force echoing through my blood. It was not just a weapon. It was a severance of the bonds that held us captive. But as I raised the dagger above the pulsating darkness, I was engulfed by the full wrath of Esther's family, claws tearing at my spirit. Their cries crescendoed, a thrumming beat that viciously sought to reclaim their lost essence. "You dare obstruct our feast. You are one of us now, forever bound." "No," I bellowed. "The feast will no longer be your torment. Your hunger will not consume the living any longer." With a savage, primal scream, I plunged the dagger into the pulsing heart, the blade piercing through flesh, the sickly warmth spilling out like a torrent, washing over me and the supposed family gathered around. Time folded in upon itself as the very essence of the house erupted, the very foundations shaking as the screams transcended the veil of reality. The faces began to melt, screeches rising as darkness erupted beneath the surface, swirling around like a vortex seeking to reclaim what belonged to despair. But I held my ground, fueled by the agony of those who came before those lost in the cycle of hunger. "Remember who you are, remember," I shouted, channeling everything I could into the heart, the dagger thrumming with energy as it soaked in the memories I had forged with my own family. Their grief, their joy, twisted now into power, and I would not let their lives be consumed. "Jake!" Esther's voice rang as she broke free from the vortex, illuminated by a light meant to guide lost souls. I could see her more clearly as she surged forward. "Join me. Together we can free ourselves." Every ounce of familial love, lost in the thick tapestry of trauma, surged between us. As I pressed the knife deeper, the dagger sparked in the core of the darkness, releasing a blinding flash. The shadows screeched, contorting in agony, and a deafening roar erupted like a tidal wave sweeping all remnants of despair away. In that moment, the house fractured, light flooding through the windows, penetrating the thick gloom that had ruled the halls for too long. Expanses of colorful memories filled the room, a melange of laughter, love, and warmth intertwined with each soul's plight that had been bound to the curse of the feast. As I stumbled backward, breathless, I felt the darkness disperse, and the thrumming of the heart fell silent. A weight lifted, and shards of memories burst into bursts of radiant light. Though I could no longer see Esther in the chaos, I could still feel her presence as the shadows retreated, merging back into the darkness from whence they came. But just before the last flicker of that horror disappeared, a chilling whisper sliced through the remnants of chaos, a promise more terrible than the feast we had escaped. "You cannot escape us. There will always be room for one more at the table." The ground beneath me trembled as horror washed over me, the realization crashing like a cold wave. Now I was the key. The very essence of the house throbbed with my blood, marking me as part of its legacy. And as I stumbled back through the door, the world outside vivid yet infinitely cursed, I knew deep down that the darkness still lingered, waiting patiently for my return, and behind me, the faint, echoing laughter of my family beckoned muffled in the distance, promising that as long as Thanksgiving existed, the feast was never truly over.